Our subject today we're talking about is a TradeLog refresher. Most all of you have used TradeLog before, and so we're glad you're back. Most of you, it looks like based on the registration, are still working on finishing your 2012 taxes. So we're going to primarily be talking about using TradeLog for finishing your 2012 tax reporting. We want to go through some highlights in the next 30 minutes about changes that have taken place in TradeLog during the last year, as well as a few things to keep in mind when you are using TradeLog for tax reporting for 2012. And this way it'll help answer some questions, some things that you might have missed out on. I'll tell you this as well, when we send you the link with the recording to the webinar, we're going to have some additional resources in that email as well. So if there's something that we discuss that maybe you have more questions about, that email that we're going to send after the webinar is done may give you some more instructions and more detailed information that might apply to your particular situation. So be looking for that here within the next 24 hours. Our goal today is to help you use TradeLog to finish your 2012 tax reporting. So we're going to highlight some of the new features that have come out in TradeLog in the last year that some people may not be as aware of. And we're also going to review some important tax reporting information for 2012. But before we do that, we want to start by just talking a little bit about getting support, because if you haven't used TradeLog in a while, you may open up, you might have some problems or challenges, you have questions, that happens. So we want to remind you the best way to get support. Now there's a couple of different options for getting support. You can go to our website online at www.tradelogsoftware.com, and you can click then on the support tab of our website. Just one second here. I think we're showing the wrong screen. Let me switch over. There you go. Now you should be able to see our website. So at tradelogsoftware.com/support, we have our support center. And there you can find all the different resources, our online user guide, our tutorials, find links to recorded webinars, but we also have the online support request. So you can click on that and you can submit a request through that. But we do encourage you to send your data file. If you're working on a TradeLog file and you have a question, please send your file with that, because that will allow us to give you the best support. But another thing that's often overlooked, and it's the easiest way to get support, is right from within the TradeLog program. We have all the links here on the welcome page to our user guide, to our online resources. You can also find many of these links through the help menu. But also in the help menu, we have an option to send files to support. To use this, first open the file that you're working on. So I'll open my demonstration file. Simply go to the help menu, click send files to support, and you'll get a little pop-up box. Just make sure your name and your email address is correct. Type a brief description of the problem that you're having and click send. And what that will do is that'll send your support request directly to our support department along with a copy of your data file. And why this is important is because this allows our TradeLog support team to actually see your data and to understand the problem that you're having, or if you're getting an error message, and then we can provide you exact instructions on how to resolve that problem. Many times people will first contact us and they don't send their data file to us, and it just ends up us maybe trying to guess what the problem is, or we have to go back and forth to ask you more questions. So by sending your file, you're going to find that you'll get the best possible support in the quickest amount of time. So we encourage you to do that. But also when it comes to our support resources and and getting help, keep in mind that we have the 8-step guide, Getting Started Quickly, or the Quick Start Guide. And this guide applies not only the first time you're using TradeLog, but if you're using TradeLog again, maybe you used TradeLog last year, the Quick Start Guide is going to guide you through the key steps of the software. And so you can access this right from TradeLog. Simply go to the Help menu and click on Getting Started Quickly. And this is going to open up our user guide right within the software. And there you have the 8 steps of our Quick Start Guide. So if you haven't touched TradeLog since you finished your taxes last year, just go to step 1, which will either direct you to create a new file or to locate your file from last year. And just follow the steps right through. This is often overlooked, the Quick Start Guide, but we've over the years developed these 8 core steps to using TradeLog successfully. And so we definitely want you to review that, follow those steps. And today I'm going to highlight a few areas where maybe there's some things that are different than what you've seen in the past. And so we'll talk about some of those changes, and I'll encourage you to look a little bit closer at those steps when you get to them. All right, so let's start by talking now about some of the new features that we've come out with in TradeLog in the last year. Again, some of you, because you filed an extension, maybe you haven't really looked at TradeLog much in the last year since you finished your taxes last time. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the new features. The 2 biggest new features we have is, 1, the multi-account data files. You can now manage all of your trading accounts in one single TradeLog file, whereas in the past you may have had a separate file for each brokerage account. This is a real plus. There's lots of advantages to that, and I'll show you more on that in a moment. And then I'm going to also show you the year-end checklist. This is a new feature that helps to ensure that you complete important steps that are needed at the end of each tax year. So I'm going to switch over to TradeLog here, and you'll notice the file I've opened up here, my demonstration file. You'll notice there's tabs now, and if you haven't seen this yet, this is the multi-account format in the TradeLog file. So you can simply add tabs for each of the accounts that you have, each of the different brokerage accounts. You can have your cash basis accounts. You can also have IRA accounts. So if you have an IRA, you can track that in TradeLog. We'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes why that's important. Also, if you are using a MarktoMarket accounting because you elected Section 475 trader status, if you have the MarktoMarket version of TradeLog, you're also able to create accounts for MarktoMarket accounting. So you can manage all of these accounts within the same file. You'll notice, I know it might be a little small on the screen, but we have the All Accounts tab. And so you can view a combined a tab that shows all of your account history in one location. And then, of course, you can drill down. You can go to the individual tabs if you want to look at the separate accounts. One thing that's important if you are using a multi-account version is to make sure and run your tax file, your tax reporting from the Combined Accounts tab at the end of the year. We'll talk more about that a little bit later as well. But this is some great advantages. Now, if you haven't yet converted over to a multi-account file, say that last year you had more than one brokerage account and you used the old method, which was individual files in TradeLog, then what we encourage you to do is take a look at our user guide. Again, you can click F1 in the software to go straight to the user guide. And under Create New File and locate your files, there you're going to find information about multi-account versions of TradeLog. And so you can check out the user guide. We have some resources there on how to convert your files to the new multi-account. And that way you are ready to go for using TradeLog for 2012. Going forward, once you've converted your file to the multi-account format, TradeLog is going to keep all those tabs combined together in each preceding year. So that'll make it a lot easier for you to manage all of your account history, and also adds some tremendous value when it comes to running performance reporting as well, having all of your information in one place. The other feature I mentioned that's new is the year-end checklist. Now let me switch back again to our Quick Start Guide. Step 6 of our Quick Start Guide is ending the tax year. And so many of our users, if you've used TradeLog in the past, you know that it's very important to end the tax year, to run this step at the end of the year. But what we were finding was that some people were forgetting some of the important steps they needed to do before they ended the tax year. So now part of our instructions when you get to this step will tell you how to use the year-end checklist. And I'll give you an example here. I'll click on my Schwab account. If I right-click on this account, I see the option for year-end checklist. I can open that up. And here basically is a checklist of some key things I need to make sure and do before I end the tax year. The first one is expiring any open options. So when I go to click that, you'll notice in this file I get a warning because I have options that are still open past expiration. So what I need to do is go ahead and click on the little button here, the hot button, and it'll go straight to that feature. I can expire my options that are past expiration. I'll save my records. Now everything's squared away. So now when I go back to the year-end checklist, it'll let me check that off. So some of the features when you go to check that off on the checklist, if TradeLog identifies that it doesn't look like you actually finished that, we're going to give you a warning. But you want to go through all of these steps. If you need help with any of the steps, there's a little help button also that you can click on, and that's going to take you straight to the instructions for that particular step. So if you're not sure whether you completed that or you're not sure how to complete that step, you can just click on that help button. So that's an important new feature in TradeLog. You need to complete the year-end account checklist for each of your accounts. Once you've done that, then you can go and run the end tax year function. Again, all of the instructions are in our Quick Start Guide under Step 6 for ending the tax year. So we encourage you to make sure and review those instructions and pay attention to this new change that's going to help ensure that you complete the year-end process correctly. Now let's talk about a few other aspects that have changed or in TradeLog, or things that affect a lot of people when it comes to tax filing. But first I want to talk about Section 1256 contracts. If you're not familiar with what a Section 1256 contract is, these are securities that qualify for special treatment by the IRS. The Section 1256 contracts, the most common ones that most people know are futures. But also there's broad-based index options, as well as many ETF options are now qualified as Section 1256 contracts. So these are treated differently than traditional stocks and options and securities like that. So the reason we bring this up is that some of our users have been surprised. They'll get a message, a warning in TradeLog that they have futures or Section 1256 contracts, and they think, well, I don't trade futures. That may be the case, but keep in mind, if you trade any broad-based index options or ETF options, we added a feature in TradeLog last year to identify these securities because you can benefit from the special tax reporting, the special tax handling of those securities. I'll show you an example again in the file that I'm in right now. For example, if I run my Form 8949 report, I'm just going to click through this quickly. When I exit this report, you'll see I get a pop-up message warning me the file includes Section 1256 contracts. So if you see that message, that means that TradeLog identified securities that qualify as Section 1256 contracts. I'll click OK. If I want to drill down and see, well, what are those trades? I can go up to the Find menu and click on Futures. Again, you may not actually trade futures, but these are treated the same in the view of the IRS. So when I click Find Futures, you'll notice there's securities in the type column. They're listed as FUT-100. So these are classified very similar to futures. So all of these are securities that TradeLog has identified as Section 1256 contracts. And that means that these are then reported a little bit differently. They're reported on Form 6781 rather than on Form 8949. Also, if you have any of these securities that are held open at the end of the year, the IRS says that Section 1256 contracts are mark-to-market. So they're closed out at the end of the year at fair market value, reopened in the next year. For that reason, we only support Section 1256 contracts with an MTM version of TradeLog. In other words, a version of TradeLog that has the mark-to-market functionality. This is important. We added this because what we found out was that many traders were simply ignoring these securities. They weren't handling them, weren't reporting them correctly at year end. So we added the functionality to make sure that you report these securities correctly. Now again, I just covered that very quickly. I am going to be including in our follow-up email, there'll be a link where you can go to our blog and to our website, and you can read more about the Section 1256 contracts, how they're handled, how they're reported, and what you need to do if you have any in your particular account. All right, so now another area that is a little bit new, not really that new, but it's something else that we now support in TradeLog, is with IRA wash sales. Of course, your IRA account is not reported to the IRS, but the IRS wash sale rules do say that it's possible that you could trade something in your IRA that could trigger a wash sale or could disallow a loss in your taxable account. Now, there are special rules that are involved with IRA wash sales. They're not handled like typical wash sales. Now, what actually happens is the loss is permanently disallowed, so there's no adjustment in the IRA. So for that reason, we give some tips actually on our website and on our blog about how to be very careful when it comes to what you trade in your IRA. But over the last several years, the IRS has given a lot more attention to IRA wash sales. It's something that has been in the rules for a while, but many people have just ignored. But there have been a couple of cases where traders were audited. It was found that they were not adjusting for IRA wash sales, and they faced penalties. In fact, there were several more high-profile cases where the IRS did make rulings to confirm and support the rules that have been in place in Publication 550. So how does TradeLog handle IRA wash sales? Well, what we do is we allow you to import the trade history for your IRA accounts. And having that trade history, TradeLog is then able to identify if any of these types of wash sales occurred and make the appropriate adjustments. Now keep in mind, your IRA is not reported to the IRS. So even though you're importing it into TradeLog, we're not reporting those gains and losses to the IRS. We're simply using that trade history to make any wash sale adjustments that need to be made in the taxable accounts. Another great feature of TradeLog is TradeLog is going to make sure and only make those wash sales if it absolutely has to. So for example, if you had a loss that occurred in a taxable account and you traded within 30 days in the IRA, we're going to look to see if it's possible to prevent that wash sale adjustment by keeping the loss in your taxable account first. Again, there's more information about this on our blog. I'll show you a quick example here in TradeLog. In the demo file that I have, I've imported my IRA account, and I also have my taxable account at Schwab. When I click on the All Accounts tab and I go up to Reports, if I run the Wash Sale Detailed report, it's actually going to identify wash sales that were permanently lost to IRA accounts. So in this case, I do have $275 that in losses that were permanently disallowed because I made the mistake of purchasing shares of FTR within 30 days of a loss, and there was no other option that TradeLog had but to disallow those based on wash sale rules. So this is one of the features in TradeLog. We make those adjustments accurately according to what the Publication 550 instructs. We also provide you the reporting to see what's happening. So that's something to be aware of and to take advantage of if you do have an IRA account and you need to make sure that you've accounted for any possible wash sales that could take place. All right, moving on to our next topic, which is 1099B. Of course, we know that there are many problems that exist with 1099B reporting now that cost basis is included. If you haven't heard about those problems, if it's something new to you, then we're telling you now there are many problems. We encourage you to check out our report. We've published a special report online. If you go to our homepage, TradeLogSoftware.com, right at the top we have in orange a link to the 1099B problem. It's a special report on why IRS regulations have failed to meet cost basis reporting needs. So we encourage you to check that out if you have not yet done so, because it will really help you understand the problems with the 1099B, as well as how active traders and tax professionals are dealing with those problems when it comes to reconciling with Form 8949. But in the meantime, now that we know that there are problems, it's important that we pay attention to the TradeLog 1099 reconciliation. This is a feature in TradeLog that helps to verify that you have imported all of your trade history. It also helps to account for differences between the 1099 and Form 8949, which you create for your tax reporting. I'm going to go over to TradeLog and I'm going to quickly go to this process. Now, this is step 5 in the user guide, the quick start guide in TradeLog, which is reconciling 1099B. So we encourage you to follow those directions completely when you're going through that quick start guide. But here, when I click on one of my accounts, my Schwab account, if I go to the reports menu and click on reconcile 1099B, here it pulls up a dialog box. This is where you enter your 1099B information. And this is the most important step that we want to encourage you to make sure you read and follow the instructions. There is a lot of information and a lot of text on this page. I want to go through a few key features of this real quickly. The first thing we see in the top left corner here is our 1099B totals. So there's information that is contained on your 1099B that you need to enter into TradeLog. We do not import that information automatically. That's part of how we keep separate records to make sure that you have accurate, verifiable information. So now the reconciliation process asks you to enter some totals from the 1099B. TradeLog then uses those totals to help make a reconciliation. The first thing that you have to enter is total gross proceeds, or total sales. Usually the broker reports this as a total for line 2, but some brokers do not provide a total, and so you may have to go in and actually add up a couple of subtotals. I'll show you in a moment what I'm talking about as far as these totals. So that's the first thing we ask for, is total gross proceeds. The second thing right underneath that, we ask for total cost basis that's reported to the IRS. And there's a key phrase there, reported to the IRS. Also, sometimes brokers will say covered securities. So brokers are not required to report all cost basis information to the IRS. So even though your 1099B statement may have some cost basis information that's on it, some of that may not be reported to the IRS. As confusing as that sounds, that's the way it is. And let me switch over here and I'll show you an example in a 1099B so you can see what I'm talking about. So here we have a 1099B. You'll notice at the top it actually says this is a statement. This section is short-term transactions, covered securities. So cost basis is reported to the IRS. So we see that the top heading. So that tells us that this section of the 1099, the cost basis information is reported to the IRS. Now you may see other sections that are non-covered. It may include cost basis information still, but they only provided that, the broker only provided that for your information. They actually did not send that to the IRS. That's something that many people struggle with. They don't understand that the report you get from your broker is not the same thing that your broker sent the IRS. You get a statement that often includes a lot of extra information, and sometimes that's just confusing. In this case, I'll show you, this broker has a summary of the totals for the section. So you see in this case there are 5 different sections that the broker reported, but you'll notice where it says detail schedule, only 4 of those are officially 1099B information. One section, it says proceeds not reported to the IRS. So that section that they provided, none of that information was sent to the IRS. So I would not include those proceeds when I'm coming up with my total. Also, I have the other sections. You'll notice there's an A and a B for short term and an A and a B for long term. The section A is where they did report the cost basis to the IRS. The section B, they did not. So when I look at my cost basis totals, only those totals from section A were actually reported to the IRS. So every broker tends to be a little bit different. So you may need to take a few moments, if you haven't yet done so, to look at your 1099B and understand what the broker is reporting. then you can better understand what gets imported into TradeLog. Now again, this is a real quick covering of the 1099. We do have another webinar that we did that really talked more about reconciling 1099, as well as our tutorials and information online. So the follow-up email that you're going to get after this session will include some additional links. So if you have more questions about this, we encourage you to check that information out. But before I move on to the next topic, I want to also highlight, when you're entering the 1099 information, on the right side of this dialog box, there's some check boxes. Now we have some things that are automatically checked off, but we give some options where you need to check with your 1099 to see what your broker reports, what they don't report. For example, some brokers adjust sales for option premiums, some do not. So you'll have to see which applies to you. Same when it comes to mutual funds, ETFs, DRIPs. Most brokers are reporting those in 2012, but you may have one of those brokers that's doing things a little bit different. But I want to take a moment. This very top box here is for options. This by default, we do not check this because there are no brokers that are required by the IRS, nor are there any brokers that we know of that have reported options on the 1099-B. This is not going to be required until the 2014 tax year as it stands right now. So it is highly unlikely that your broker reported options. So if you're thinking of checking that box, that could alter the results in TradeLog. So we encourage you to be very careful not to check that box unless you are 100% sure. And if you're not 100% sure, you can always send us a copy of your 1099 and we can double check to answer the question, did your broker report options or not? But to date, of every 1099 I've seen, I have not seen a single broker who reports options. So I just want to make that very clear because that has caused some confusion for some people. All right, so now going back to our next topic when we talk about the tax aspect is Form 8949. And again, Form 8949 is something that was started last year in 2011 tax year. It's also used for 2012. Almost everyone uses the 8949 along with Schedule D. So if you're reporting on Schedule D, most likely you need to fill out Form 8949. There are just a couple of little exceptions, but majority of people do need to complete Form 8949. This is the main report used in TradeLog for tax reporting for your stocks, your options, your other capital gains and losses. So you run that from the All Accounts tab. Again, if you have multiple accounts in TradeLog, it's important that you run this report from the All Accounts tab. And one of the things I'm going to show you is that we do make an adjustment on the Form 8949 based on the information you entered in what I just talked about, the 1099-B details. So I'm going to go over to TradeLog. And again, if you have a multi-account file, make sure and click on All Accounts when it comes time to run your final tax reporting. If you forget that, we'll probably pop up a warning message to tell you you're not running the report from the right location. When I go to run my Form 8949, you'll notice there's a checkbox, two little checkboxes in the top left corner. One is to include an adjustment to reconcile the difference with 1099-B. By default, that's turned on because that is something that most tax professionals are recommending. You can also choose the option to put your Social Security number or your EIN number on your 8949. That's totally up to you. So I'm going to keep this option to include the adjustment line. I'll keep that checked and I'll run the report. Now I will mention that this report shows in draft. You'll see the big draft on the background there. That's because I haven't ended the tax year. So until you complete the in-tax year process, all of your tax reports will show as draft. Again, we want to make sure you complete the necessary steps before you continue on. But here at the end of the first section, which is Part 1 with Category A checked, you'll notice this adjustment to reconcile difference with 1099-B. So here we enter an adjustment line. In column F, it's coded as Category B or Code B. So what this adjustment is doing is it's making an adjustment in TradeLog based on what you said your broker reported to the IRS for cost basis and what TradeLog is reporting. Now, some people may have a very small adjustment. Some people may have large adjustments. If you're wondering, well, what is this adjustment? What I encourage you to do is go to the last page of the 8949 report. On the last page, we provide information that explains how we generate Form 8949, how we reconcile with 1099B, and we explain what that adjustment line is. And that way you understand that adjustment and you understand what to do with it. Now, again, it is optional. You can choose to turn off that adjustment if you don't want that on there. But basically, what that adjustment is doing is it's making sure that when the IRS is comparing your 8949 with the 1099B, we've reconciled any differences. Again, there's many problems with the 1099B. So there's a bunch of reasons why your 8949 is going to be different than the 1099B. But what we're doing is we're helping reconcile that so that the IRS sees that, yes, you've done your taxes correctly, you recognize there's a difference, and you're explaining that on your forms. So again, if you're not familiar with this feature, it is nothing new. It was something that we included last year as well. But we encourage you to check out the last page of that report. You can also check out our tax topics online or contact our support department if you are not sure about what that adjustment is or if you're concerned about that adjustment amount. So that's a little bit about the Form 8949. Going back to our topics here, we've talked about Form 8949, so I think that kind of brings us to the end of the key topics we want to talk about. I'm just a couple minutes over my 30 minutes, but we are going to stick around because I know we have some questions that some of you have asked and some questions that were submitted in advance. Now, one thing we just talked about Form 8949, and we talked a little bit about 1099B. So one question that came up was about the Form 8949, making it match the 1099B. And again, I want to emphasize, if you're not aware, if you haven't read our special report about 1099B problems, we really encourage you to go to our website and check out that special report, 1099B problem, because there are some serious problems with the 1099B. And although in an ideal world, it would be nice to just take your 1099B and have that match the 8949. The reality is there's a lot of rules, additional rules that apply to you as a taxpayer when it comes to your Form 8949. So you cannot, many of you just can't use your 1099B as is. You have to make additional adjustments required by the IRS. If you do just try to use what the broker put on the 1099B. If you were ever audited or the IRS ever found a problem, you couldn't use the excuse that that's what the broker reported, because the IRS always says you're responsible for your tax reporting. So we want to make sure and highlight that, because it is very important that you are aware of those problems and aware of the differences. The good news is we do have a proven method that we've been using even before all these problems existed. Since 1999, we've been generating accurate tax reporting for active traders. We know how to do it. We know how to follow the IRS rules. The headache has just been trying to reconcile that with what your broker's reporting. Another question that came up is about e-filing. How do you e-file with, especially like if you want to use a program like TurboTax or you're using some of their tax software? So one of the things that I encourage you to check out, if you're in TradeLog, again, just go to our user guide, or actually go to click on Getting Started Quickly, the Quick Start Guide. Step 8 talks about filing your taxes. So when you click on that, you'll see there's two options from there, e-filing or other methods. So if you click on e-filing, we step you through several things here about e-filing. And one of the things that we explain right off the top is Form 8453. This is a wonderful option. If you're using TaxAct or TurboTax, you may know that in the past, sometimes it was challenging trying to import data. Even though we have methods that we've worked with TurboTax and TaxAct to import your data from TradeLog into their programs, still sometimes it doesn't work as well. It's because there's a lot more complicated information that you have as an active trader. But Form 8453 is a great method that the IRS allows, and both TurboTax and TaxAct support that method. What you're able to do is basically select the option to include an attachment, and you just simply put the totals from TradeLog into the program that you're using, whether it be TaxAct or TurboTax, and then when you're ready to file, you actually send to the IRS your TradeLog generated report, your Form 8949, along with another form that your tax program will create for you, Form 8453. So you still mail that form in to the IRS, you mail that, but you're still able to e-file your total return. Basically, it's just sending the IRS supplemental information that was not sent through your e-file. So that's a great method. We give all the instructions on how to do that right here within our user guide, and you can click on that to go through those step-by-step instructions. If you do want to import your data, you can do that as well, and we give the instructions on our user guide, which you can also find online as well. Okay, another question that came up is about what if you already filed your 2012 taxes and your broker sent an amended 1099-B? Nothing like timing, right? Maybe you filed before April 15th, and now this summer, and we've actually heard about this. I heard of someone just recently received an amended 1099-B. It's now August. Go figure. But it happens. So the question that was posed is, do I need to refile my taxes? Again, we can't give you tax advice, so I can't say for sure whether you need to refile or not. But keep in mind, again, that TradeLog generated your Form 8949 by using actual trade history. We don't rely on the 1099-B. So what we did is we created accurate tax reporting based on the rules for you as a taxpayer. So if your broker amended the 1099-B, it's very likely that does not change what was reported by TradeLog. It may change the reconciliation amount, and it might change the adjustment line that we had in. So that's what you'll want to look at. If you're not sure, if you have questions about is there any difference, you can always send us your TradeLog file and your 1099-B and ask if the change that the broker made, if that changed anything in TradeLog, and we can try to look at that. But beyond that, you may have to check with your CPA or tax advisor if there's anything else that you need to refile, or if they recommend notifying the IRS that you got an amended 1099-B after the fact. So again, you might have to check with them for that type of advice. Another question that came up, what if you're done with 2012 and you're ready to move on to 2013? That's a great question, and again, that's answered when you follow the Quick Start Guide. So if I go back here in our user guide, and I go back to the Getting Started Quickly guide, if you follow this process through, then once you complete step 6, which is ending the tax year, what TradeLog is going to do is it's going to generate a file for the next tax year. So once you finish 2012, if you end the tax year correctly, it's going to create a 2013 file. It'll have the same name as the file used for 2012. It'll have all the same account tabs, and it will roll over all the positions that you carried over from 2012 into 2013. So all you'll have to do is open up your 2013 file, and you can just continue importing that. You can import it up to date. You can bring it up to date right now, and we encourage you to do that because there's a lot of great tools and features in TradeLog that you can use throughout the year to measure your performance and analyze how you're doing. So by all means, go ahead and import 2013. In fact, we encourage our users to import at least once a month because that helps keep your trade history up to date, and it makes it a whole lot easier when it comes tax time because you're not worried about trying to get a whole bunch of past tax year data. Sometimes brokers surprise you and they limit the data all of a sudden, or they have problems. So by importing once a month, you're going to find it a lot easier to use TradeLog. All right, so let's see if we have any more questions here. I think we answered a lot of them. Don asked about importing into TradeLog as far as duplicate records. If you are importing throughout the year with TradeLog, we do have some safeguards in place to help prevent you from duplicating your records. Number one, if you already imported your trades for a certain date, like for example, if I imported my trades for August 14th, and I go and I try to import trades for August 14th again, TradeLog is going to warn me. It's going to stop me and say, don't do that. And it's going to notify me that I had already imported trades. So then from there, if you made a mistake or something, you can get things straightened out. Within the date, usually TradeLog's not going to, because we're going to bring in trade history only for one day at a time or for a specific date range, we shouldn't have any other situations where there's duplicates that occur. Another thing is, for example, with most brokers, you're not able to import the current date. Like today's August 15th. If you go and you try to import today's trades, TradeLog's probably going to stop you because a lot of brokers still don't report timestamps in their trade history. So without the timestamps, we have no way of ensuring that you don't accidentally duplicate your trade history. So there's several safeguards in TradeLog to prevent you from duplicating records. It's pretty difficult to do. Really, the only way you can duplicate records is by forcing something that you maybe shouldn't be doing in the software. So there are those safeguards for you. All right, let's see if we have any more questions. I know Melina's been answering a lot of the questions for us offline, and see if there's any questions that are best answered for everyone. So let me check here. One thing we didn't talk much about is mark-to-market accounting. Of course, if you did elect Section 475F, you've got trader status, you use mark-to-market accounting. So if you're using mark-to-market, you don't use Form 8949 usually, though it is possible that you may have an investment account. But usually you're going to use Form 4797, and that's going to report your trading gains and losses. Of course, you don't have wash sale rules. That doesn't apply if you file mark-to-market. So now, one question we do get from people sometimes is, can I file mark-to-market? Well, keep in mind that in order to use mark-to-market accounting, you have to elect that. And I'm going to try to pull up on our website. If you go to our trader taxes topics, we have a section about mark-to-market accounting. So you could select that, and we explain here what is mark-to-market. We talk about why you need TradeLog with that. And then on the right side, there's more topics, pros and cons, how to elect, and how to report. So if that's something that you're thinking of doing or you're interested in, and maybe you are a very active trader, we encourage you to check that out and might answer any questions. One thing I always recommend, if you are thinking of making that change and going to mark-to-market accounting, we strongly recommend talking with a tax advisor, a CPA who specializes in trader taxes, to at least get some consultation to make sure that you qualify. We recommend Green Trader Tax, who we work closely with. Bob Green and his associates are experts on those topics, and so they are good ones to talk to about that. All right, well, I think we answered most of the questions we're going to answer live. We may still have a couple of questions that we'll answer directly. So if you submitted a question that you're still waiting for an answer, you can hang around, and we will stick around here, and we'll send a few responses via chat. But for everyone else, I think that's kind of sums up our refresher course. And like I said, keep an eye on your inbox, because we will send you an email with the recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to watch the session again. Also, we'll send you additional information, some additional links that will go into some of the topics we discussed in more depth. And so that way, if there's something that we covered that you need to learn more about, you'll have the resources to get extra help. And don't forget, If you do have questions, you do need help, use the features I mentioned to send files to support, and you can get the help that you need. We're here to help and support you, and we encourage you to do that. But please do send your file along with your question, because then we can get you the best answers in the quickest amount of time. So again, thank you for joining us today. That's going to conclude the main part of our presentation. Like I mentioned, we will stick around for a few minutes and we'll answer a few other questions that you may have. So if you haven't received an answer to your question, just stick around and we'll send that to you via the chat. Thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great evening.